Hello my lovely Misfitians, and welcome back to another video. As most of you know, we are currently going through a series where we are exploring watercolor paper. And for this series, we're going to be pairing two different watercolor papers from two different brands and then battling them against one another. Now, if you are new here and you haven't watched the previous video, you might be a little bit confused, so I highly recommend you go and watch that one first before watching this one. And the reason for that is because in round one, we basically took 10 different watercolor papers and paired them against one another and eventually ended up with the current papers that we have for this round, plus the one that you voted on last week. And that one won hands down. There was really no competition. Y'all all wanted Arches to end up in the second round of our Battle Royale of the brands. So as most of you know, for each round I'm targeting several different objectives to test on these watercolor papers to see which one wins the battle and moves on to the next round. So for round two, I really wanted to focus on more wet and wet. So in this round, we're going to be taking the best of the best from round one and really pushing them with heavy water illustrations. Now, I do want to say and be completely transparent, I did do some rearranging of the brands based on the brackets, and I did that for a specific reason. I really wanted Canson XL and B paper to be paired together because these two are the cheapest watercolor papers that I purchased, and I wanted a winner based on the two cheapest papers. So that's the reason why I wanted to move these together as a round. However, the other ones, I really didn't care how they were paired up. So I left those to fate and I put all the names into a pot and then pulled them out one by one. And these are how they were paired. So now that we have that clarified, let's go ahead and look at the objectives that I'm going to be looking at for round two. The very first one is going to be warping and buckling. I want to know how much. I know all of these papers are going to buckle because of the amount of water that I'm going to be using, but I want to know how much they're going to buckle, because if they buckle way too much, there's no way I'm going to be able to paint on them. The second thing that I'm going to be looking at is glazing, or the layering of my colors. So a lot of times, if you over push your paper with water, it's very hard to layer on top of another color. So that is the next thing that I'm really going to be looking for. Thirdly, I'm going to be looking for, is the paper being overworked? Since I'm using a lot of water, it's very easy to overwork these papers. And I want to see how much water I can use on these papers before they really get pushed beyond their limit. And finally, as always, I'm going to be looking at the overall feel. As I stated in the first video, watercolor supplies is very much a personal thing to the artist, and that's why I feel like this is very important for me. I want to be able to be painting on something that I feel I'm having a good time with and not necessarily fighting the paper. So those are the objectives for round two. Let's go ahead and get into the battles. And for the very first battle, we are going to be having Canson XL and B paper paired against one another. And here are the results for that battle. And at the end, bee paper definitely won over Canson. And it was mainly because bee paper allowed me to glaze over several different layers and not really loosen or create weird textures with the previous layers that I'd already painted. Whereas Canson just could not handle that amount of glazing that I was putting on the paper. So bee paper moves on to round 3. Now moving on to the second battle. And here are the results of that particular battle. So in the end, Fabriano won over Humamule, and I have noticed this when painting on Humamule, it doesn't do really well with heavy loads of water. And I have to say also, the Fabriano was still struggling with the amount of water that I was putting on it, but when you paired the two next to each other, I felt like the Fabriano won slightly more than the Humamule, but it was really, really close. And finally, our last battle is Saunders and Arches. And here are the results of this battle. And here are the results of that particular battle. And in the end, Arches won. Arches was able to really keep up with the amount of water that I was putting on this paper. But I have to say, in the end, Arches just felt like it was performing a lot better and wasn't becoming overworked as quickly as Sanders was. And those are the winners for round 2. Now, make sure to tune in next week for round 3, because in that particular round, I really want to work on dark illustrations, such as really building up depth in an illustration. That's really the last thing that I look for when I'm looking for a really good watercolor paper. So you've probably noticed in the past 2 illustrations, they've been more light and airy. But in the next round, I want to really push my glazing and layering of paint to create depth, and also use really super inky, intense colors and see how these 3 papers measure up. And in the end, you're going to be voting on which one is your favorite. So make sure to tune in next week so that you can be part of the vote of deciding which paper performed the best. And that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.